the very word of God, people who reject the very word of God.
Welcome to Freethinking 101, a course unlike any you have taken before. We challenge you to examine the beliefs, values, judgments, and your mindset, your biases and prejudices, your religion, your philosophy. In short, to examine the recesses of your mind and defend the cobwebs you store in that belfry. Freethinking 101 is brought to you by the Rationalist Society of St. Louis, Post Office Box 2931, St. Louis, Missouri 63130. Our speaker this evening is Pat Inniss, who is the chair of the Rationalist Society, and he's going to talk to us some this evening about mind control. What is that, Pat?
Well, there's really, I guess, been a certain amount of speculation among, well, particularly among non-believers or people outside of the real religious, conservative stream of religion that we've seen develop or come into flower in the past couple of decades about really the psychological aspects of devout religious belief. I guess the terms such as Jesus freak, come to mind. People that have sold out to Jesus, burned out on Jesus. These types of mindsets have prompted some amount of speculation about what is the psychological effect of devout religious belief.
What's happened to those people?
Yes, what type of mental processes are at work that bring them to this sort of a stereotypical, almost has become there's sort of a conservative religious archetype now that you can identify. There's a question of whether some type of brainwashing is taking place, or mind control. What are the critical processes, the critical thinking processes that, do these people abandon all critical thinking? Sometimes it appears that way. So there's a lot of work that's been going on in this area among psychologists, particularly. Most of it has been really focused at the sects, the more fringe religious groups, and analyzing the psychological methodology that's being applied to people that are involved in that sort of religion.
Like Jim Jones' outfit and Hare Krishnas and that sort of thing.
How do you get people to really leave the cultural mainstream, or if they are leaving the cultural mainstream, and become one of these groups and violate a lot of what you would think would be the values that they had lived with previously in their lives? And I came across a book, I guess, which is really I'm going to talk about today. It's the Mind of the Bible Believer by Edmund Cohen. Now in this book, Mr. Cohen sort of takes an approach that really a lot of the mind control devices, if I may use that term, are embedded in Christianity. Nowadays, they're sort of have been used most extensively by the evangelical groups, but they are based in biblical references.
Yeah, you say embedded in Christianity, but this could apply to other religions as well. For example, Islam and some of the other more, I wouldn't say cantankerous, but
well, that's I would tend to think that a lot of religions use the same techniques, but not necessarily all religions. And this book, of course, deals with Christianity in the Bible and the techniques that are used in the Bible. So in that reference, he doesn't really address how this relates back to more religion in a more general sense. Yes. But he does make a very strong argument for the use of mind control devices by a large part of Christianity, and that it is really part of the Christian tradition. So now when you say mind control, though, I guess we ought to qualify that in terms of it's not a Manchurian candidate sort of thing.
Yeah, I had that in mind.
Okay. It may be a little too strong a term, but, because that sort of implies use of a force or a redirection of the individual will. And while we don't here see a redirection of will, we do sort of see a sublimation of will, or a defeat, in a sense, of individual will. And Mr. Cohen really goes to some lengths to to tie this back to biblical references and to build put this whole thing in a very well thought out psychological context. And he also, I guess one of his primary tenet is looking at this from a mental health point of view and saying that this does cause a lot of psychological strain for the people that get caught up in this web of mind control.
Yeah, well, we'll see as we go along. That's my area, working with the mentally ill, and so we can see if there are parallels.
There are. Well, the way he does this is he develops a number of mechanisms that are used to, I guess you could say, to assure acceptance of Christian dogma. Now, that's one of the areas I had a little trouble picking up in the book was what you can place religion in several different contexts if you want to explain the motivation behind the acceptance of religious beliefs. There's certainly a lot of social relevance to religion in terms of the propping up of some type of power structure or authority. It has historically tied in with governments. And then there's a lot of interpersonal dynamics that are used in religion and a lot of internal psychological reasons that a person might be driven to accept religious beliefs. So in that context, it's a little indistinct what the motivation is, but they certainly have developed a lot of mechanisms that make this whole thing happen. And what he's developed is he calls them 7 devices that are used to get the person to accept religious dogma, and beyond accepting religious dogma, to actually become a member of some sort of church community, which is important, the social aspects here.
Okay. The
first device that he uses is what he calls the benign, attractive persona of the Bible. Now this is, I guess in this show at times we've dealt with some of the strange aspects of the Bible, the violent aspects of the Bible, the parts of the Bible that really seem to counter what we would normally in contemporary society think of as being positive values in a social...
Yeah, really uncivilized.
Well,
particularly Old Testament, I guess.
Old Testament, that's one thing that Mr. Cohen does is he cites certain specific distinctions in the character between Old Testament and New Testament. There's a lot of violence. You're right. The Old Testament is more characterized by violence. The New Testament is a little bit more subtle than that. But there are certainly a lot of mind control aspects that are used in the New Testament and things that run counter to what we would accept, in our modern 20th century Western values. But those things, the idea of a benign, attractive persona is that when the Bible is presented, when religious beliefs are presented, biblically based religious beliefs, these things are certainly not emphasized. They're very much de-emphasized.
Yeah.
Now what you get here is the equivalent of sort of a spiritual bait and switch. The positive aspects of the Bible are sold to the unconverted, to the unbelievers. When you go out proselytizing and trying to win new souls.
Put your best foot forward.
You certainly do.
Yeah.
But the other parts, the darker side of the Bible, is very important because, as Mr. Cohen believes, that the believers are going to be led deeper and deeper into sort of a web of belief and psychological mechanisms in which at a later point the darker sides of the Bible will become important in maintaining their belief.
The more arcane elements.
Yes, and these are sort of revealed to the believer, and although he has this image, this benign persona of the Bible, as he gets more, progresses in his belief and his acceptance, he comes to appreciate, in quotes, some of the darker elements of the Bible. And in doing this, he has to actually abandon some of his previous belief structure.
Sort of like being caught in the web.
Yeah, it's part of the indoctrination process, is to introduce beliefs that are contrary to your existing value structure, and thereby in some way undermine your previous beliefs and create room to implant these new ones.
Sort of authoritarian versus democratic, for example.
Yeah, yeah. He does that. The whole question of authoritarian personality is something he gets into, but that's a little later on.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he stresses this, that words in the Bible that religious people use often have two meanings, and it'll have the benign meaning to start out with. You know, words like life and love and obedience may have a very benign meaning, but as you get into it, as you become subject to the religious community, they start to have a darker meaning. Now he's critical of liberal theologians because they have really sort of greased the skids for people being attracted into religious belief by painting the Christianity, in this what we're talking about here, as being more attractive than you would think, because they try to take certain things like, well, I guess you occasionally hear people say that Christ was a feminist, and they will go through the New Testament and pick this out and pick that out, and try to put together some type of argument that Christianity is really a feminist dogma, which it couldn't be further from the truth. But this does serve the purpose of presenting a benign and attractive persona of the Bible that Cohen says is one of the primary means of really sucking people into this spiritual bait and switch.
Yeah.
Now, the other device number two that Mr. Cohen talks about is discrediting the world. And this is something that you'll find a lot of evangelicals or a lot of fundamentalists talking about, is that things of the world are bad. Okay, but it goes beyond that. It's beyond just the world, but also into a person's own mind, not to be trusted. The intellectual processes are undermined. It's sort of a general anti-intellectual bias that religion puts forth. And the mind, the brain, the human mind is of the world and is very subject to corruption. So this is really something that is another very important thing in establishing the acceptance of religious dogma, because before you can believe that Christ died and rose again after 3 days, or walked across the waters, or will return again, there has to be this suspension of disbelief. Your intellectual processes have to be sort of put on ice for a while, permanently.
It subverts your thinking.
Right. So there's a general hostility toward knowledge, and this hostility toward knowledge extends to the hostility toward the people that would convey knowledge. There's
anti-scientific.
Precisely. Well, especially now, anti-unbeliever anyway. They try to put scientific belief to use in service of promoting religion, but I guess he divides the believers' world into three types, interaction with three different types of people: the ordinary unbelievers, the believers, and then there's the competitors, who are the missionaries of false gospels. So you react to these people differently. And to unbelievers, in the Bible, you come across reference to unbelievers as crops or as fish. And the idea is that these people are almost as though we're sort of lower form of life, or inanimate objects that you go out and gather forth.
Harvest them.
Right. They're treated as objects. And that's the way believers are to react to unbelievers. They are to close their minds to unbelievers. There's no knowledge that they are allowed to accept from unbelievers. They are to bombard unbelievers with their own gospel, and also there's a suspension of the emotional processes as well, which is another level really that believers are very stilted in even reacting to each other, but particularly to unbelievers, because there's always this facade that is erected that creates the impression of a very calm inner self.
Yeah. Is this sort of like the idea of beliefs that there's only one truth, and the unbelievers, whatever they think, is not it?
Yeah. Well, the whole concept of truth almost ceases to have meaning as we know it in this context. There's not really an objective truth. There's the commandments. There's what the Lord has revealed. And it's a different view of reality. is with St. Paul when we're talking about he has not, I guess I wish I could have the quote here for you, but he doesn't rely so much on knowledge as he relies on revelation. Revelation is the thing, and revelation and objective truth aren't necessarily the same thing. It's almost a very subjective, perceptual vision of what the truth is.
I guess you see this demonstrated more in some of the more arcane kinds of religions. I'm thinking of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, where they have a set of beliefs that I think are quite different than traditional Christian beliefs, and Seventh-day Adventists and so on.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't really make much difference what the particular beliefs are, but some of the same psychological mechanisms are at play. And then there's, they're actually supposed to ostracize. I guess I could read you a quote from, let's see, one of the Gospels, if I can find it here for you very quickly, which really sort of nails down
The idea.
the approach toward unbelievers. It says, whosoever transgresseth and abideth not with the doctrine of Christ hath not God. If there come any unto you, and bring not this doctrine, receive him not into your house, neither bid him Godspeed. For he that biddeth him Godspeed is a partaker of his evil deeds. So that's a little harsh. I mean, you can't even...
strong. Yeah.
You can't even say, hey, have a nice trip to a non-believer. I guess
Have
you're
a good
supposed
day.
to trip him as he walks out the door would probably be the best way to handle non-believers. But, there's sort of a good side to this, too, in a way, because they are the definition of what an unbeliever is and a missionary of one of the competing, these are things that really separate Christians, okay? We've got so many Christian sects, say in the United States, that and they're so very parochial about their views. They're always having squabbles about what's Bible and what isn't.
Yeah.
And it's fortunate for us that actually they do have this view toward people outside their own particular belief structure, because if they ever got together on anything and ganged up on us, we'd be in deep yogurt.
We'd be outnumbered.
That's for sure.
Even more so.
But one of the, I guess I would better move on here, because I think we've got about 5 more devices. But there's another interesting one that Cohen cites is what he calls logocide. Now, logocide is the actual destruction of the meaning of words. He sort of parallels it with George Orwell's Newspeak in 1984, where you actually use the language to really destroy a person's way of thinking about things and create another one in its place. And
or Alice in Wonderland, where the word is whatever I want it to mean.
Right. Well, actually, the Bible is worse than Alice in Wonderland, because Alice in Wonderland made sense on certain levels.
To it.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the Bible is, some of it does, but a lot of it seems to be really intentionally confusing. Cohen believes what they're doing is they're trying to tie up your brain neurons and keep you from thinking about the real important things. What you'll do is you'll fixate on trying, you read this and you expect there, in your belief that this is all divinely revealed, you expect there to be some real deep meaning here. Now, in Cohen's mind, there is not any real deep meaning other than this is thrown out there to confuse you. They know by this time you're going to accept it, or you probably wouldn't be reading this stuff in the first place.
Yeah.
And unless you're like one of us rationalists and just read it to get a kick out of it for light entertainment before you fall asleep. But they do this to really confuse the issue and keep, like I say, keep your mind occupied trying to figure this stuff out. Also, it's sort of a full employment act for theologians, apparently. But they also, and they use hyperbole. Now, hyperbole, in the Semitic tradition is very very common.
Yeah.
But but they do take words, they do what Cohen calls, they load them up with very ponderous and contrived and dissonant meaning, so that you're really, when you think you're reading one thing, you've read it, okay? Now you have to go over to this guy to explain to you what you just read, because the words have meanings that are on different levels than we normally use them at. And really what you find out is when you do this, that the meaning that they apply to the word is invariably more somber and intimidating than what you thought it first meant. Okay? And when, like when in the Garden of Eden, when God said that, you know, if you eat the fruit of the tree of
Life.
knowledge of good and evil, yeah, or you will surely die. Now, you know, when he said die, what did he mean? He didn't, obviously he didn't mean he was going to keel over. It was a poison apple. What he meant was that, you know, all this other stuff was going to come down later, you know. So they assign new meanings to word to really create communications barriers between believers and non-believers. This is something.
You think this was a conscious kind of thing, process?
Well, Cohen's contention is that is one of the things we have to keep in mind about the Bible, is that it was written by people who were very well versed in the psychological processes and knew how to persuade people, how to convert people. One of his primary criticisms of atheists is that we have not concentrated on the right things in communicating with believers. We assume that by telling them that the Bible is false, it is factually inaccurate, it is contradictory, that we will score points. His contention is that until we appreciate the deeper psychological mechanisms which are at work here, we're never going to really be able to break through this barrier.
Yeah, the values that the people have as in relating to the Bible and so forth.
Yeah. It's very important to consider their point of view, what they're actually telling us. Now, you know, this semantic labyrinth, of course, you know, I didn't really think that he provided a usable suggestion for tactically how to deal with this. When you're dealing with, when you might be in the park on Sunday and meet somebody, and they start talking to you. You don't know you're dealing at first with a believer. You probably do, but there's possible that they don't. You don't, and they start talking about life and love and things like that. They're talking a different language than you are. So first of all, you have to you know, move into their lexicon so you can even communicate with them.
Yeah, you may be using the same words, but you're meaning different things.
Right. Right. Now this you mentioned earlier about the Old Testament versus the New Testament, and this is one of the areas in which there was really a shift because of the development of this whole concept. You know, talking about the word life, you know, life and death did come to have a little bit different meaning in the New Testament when they really put a much greater emphasis on afterlife, you know, everlasting life, and this kind of stuff. Immortality became a big concern, and you know, this is one of the things that they're doing is that when they use this term life, they're dealing with a fear aspect. This is one of the selling points of religion, is selling people, you know, a relief of this fear, which is a big psychological motivation for people to adopt religious views.
You may want to get into your other of the 7 points because we just have a few more minutes.
Okay. Well, I feel like I just ought to mention a couple more of these, like the linguistic unjust. Now, when we say unjust, we mean it has something to do with ethics. When a believer says unjust, or in the biblical context, unjust really refers to your salvation status. You know, are you saved?
At all costs.
So the context is completely different on a lot of these things than we really tend to, you know, we normally use them. And I would like to talk about their concepts of love and agape, but that would probably take me a long time. Just let me say that love, of course, you know, if we're humanists, we refer to love as being something that we feel from the heart. Same way with negative emotions like hate. In a Christian context, in the biblical context, you're commanded to love your enemy, and you're commanded to love even this agape is really sort of a hollow notion of love, because it is love that is commanded by the Lord. You don't love because of something energy maybe, if you wish, flowing between you and another person. You love because it is commanded of the Lord. So it takes a lot of the fun out of life for me, first of all, and second of all,
no motive for it.
Right.
Except a biblical motive.
But it didn't stop them from killing a lot of people that they supposedly loved at the same time. Now, another device is the assaulting of integrity. Now, this isn't the integrity of non-believers. Strangely, it's the internal integrity. A person has to really affirm these incredible teachings, biblical
Right.
teachings. So they have to really lose it. It comes back to the knowledge thing again, but they have to really destroy their own psychological or intellectual integrity. Device 5 is dissociation induction, where you sort of separate out your conscious from your subconscious, because even though you could convince yourself on a conscious level that something might be true, or you accept it intellectually, the subconscious is always working away trying to figure things out and put them together logically and make things work. So this is an area where there's a sort of a bifurcation of the personality, which Mr. Cohen thinks is very harmful to your psychological well-being.
Yeah.
And device 6 is bridge burning, which means that once you go across to be a believer, you can never go back.
Mm-hmm.
And device 7, this is a biggie, holy terror, which is the fear factor, which is used in religion. Fire and brimstone. People refer themselves as God-fearing more often than God-loving.
Yeah.
And I guess they feel that without this fear factor, a person would really not have a reason for accepting religious belief.
Yeah. You have both the stick and the carrot involved in the thing. You're sort of saying that they start with the carrot and they end up with the stick, if I understand you correctly.
That's about the way it works, although, it's always there. That some people come, fearing things in life, and, they may be fearing death, and a good religious practitioner will take that and twist it and play on that and use their fear of death, and, which may be translated into a fear of damnation,
Yeah.
and drive them into religion rather than drive them into any sense of satisfaction or self-actualization in psychological terms.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've just really scratched the surface on this, and maybe perhaps we can get into some more of this later on. This has been brought to you by the Rationalist Society of St. Louis, and Freethinking 101 will be brought to you again next week. Our address is Box 2931, St. Louis, Missouri 63130, and we would like to hear from you. If you have questions about the content of this program or any of our other programs, or if you have any suggestions you'd like to pass on to us, things you'd like to hear about in Freethinking 101, something you may want to examine. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you, Steve.
I believe we're off.